I was finishing my evening rounds at the nursing home when visiting hours were almost over. The hallways quiet except for the sound of soft footsteps echoing against linoleum floors and distant televisions playing shows that no one was really watching. Flickering images casting shadows on walls, decorated with cheerful paintings that try to make institutional spaces feel more like home. Most families had already left for the day, heading back to their busy lives, leaving behind flowers on knit stands that would wilt by tomorrow, and the faint smell of perfume lingering in the air. Reminders of visits that never last long enough, conversations that always feel rushed, promises to come back soon that sometimes take weeks to fulfill. I adjusted a blanket that had slipped off a resident's lap, checked medications on my clipboard to ensure everyone had received their evening doses, and gently reminded residents in passing that it was almost time to rest for the night, speaking softly so as not to startle anyone. When I heard voices rising near the common room at the end of the corridor. A group of well-dressed visitors stood near the door in expensive coats and designer handbags, laughing softly among themselves, talking about upcoming vacations to exotic locations and demanding work projects and everything happening outside these walls in the world that continues spinning while time inside nursing homes seems to stand still. As I walked past them with a clipboard in my hands and exhaustion settling into my shoulders after another long shift, one woman glanced at me with barely concealed disdain and said loudly enough for her friends to hear, "These places always smell the same, don't they?" That awful combination of antiseptic and old age, wrinkling her nose in exaggerated disgust. Another woman in the group laughed sharply and replied with casual cruelty, pointing in my direction without any attempt at discretion. "Well, I guess that's her whole life, isn't it? Taking care of people who don't even remember her name by tomorrow morning? People who can't appreciate anything she does because their minds are already gone. They didn't whisper their observations or lower their voices. They didn't need to because in their minds I was just part of the furniture. Just another fixture of this place. Someone whose feelings didn't matter. Someone who existed only to serve and then disappear from their awareness." I kept walking steadily down the hallway, pretending I hadn't heard anything they said, pretending the words didn't land heavier than I wanted to admit, pretending my heart didn't sink just a little bit more with each thoughtless comment that reduced my life as work to something pitiable and meaningless. I've worked in a nursing home for 7 long years now, 7 years of long, exhausting shifts that blur together, dealing with short staffing that leaves everyone stretched thin and overwhelmed, enduring aching feet that throb by the end of every day, holding hands when families aren't there to provide comfort, listening to the same stories over and over again because for someone whose memory is fading, it's the first time they're telling it and it matters deeply to them. People think this job is easy because it doesn't require advanced degrees. They think it's sad and depressing and something to be pitied, or temporary and just a stepping stone to something better, or something you do when you don't have better options available, when you've somehow failed at achieving more prestigious careers. They don't see the infinite patience it takes to repeat yourself gently when someone asks the same question 10 times in an hour. The emotional weight of watching people you've grown to love slowly fade away day by day, losing pieces of themselves until sometimes only fragments remain. Or the quiet moments where you read the only familiar face someone recognizes in a world that has become confusing and frightening. They don't understand that this work requires strength that has nothing to do with physical ability, that it demands compassion that must be renewed every single day despite the heartbreak, that it calls for dignity and respect in moments when it would be easier to simply go through the motions mechanically. That night, as visiting hours officially ended and families gathered their belongings to leave, one of the visitors looked back at me with what she probably thought was sympathy but felt more like pity and said condescendingly, "I honestly don't know how you do this every single day. It must be so depressing to work in a place like this, surrounded by decline and death and sadness all the time." I smiled politely at her comment, the professional smile I've perfected over years of similar interactions. Because explaining myself and my reasons for doing this work never changes their minds about anything, never makes them understand what they're determined not to see, never transforms their pity into genuine respect or appreciation. Because to them I was just a nursing home worker, just someone occupying the lowest rung on the healthcare ladder, just someone who cleaned rooms and changed sheets and passed out pills in little paper cups, performing tasks they would never consider doing themselves. I entered one of the rooms at the end of the hall to check on a resident named Mr. Harris, a man who had once been someone important in the outside world but now spent most of his days in this small room. He was sitting quietly by the window in his favorite chair, staring out into the dark night beyond the glass, watching streetlights illuminate empty sidewalks where life continued without him. "Did your family leave already?" I asked gently, knowing the answer but wanting him to know I cared enough to ask. He nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the window. "They're busy people," he said softly, without bitterness, just stating a fact he'd come to accept. "They have important jobs, and children with activities and lives that don't have much room for spending hours in nursing homes." I adjusted his blanket carefully, making sure he was comfortable against the evening chill, and turned to leave him to his thoughts when I heard his voice again, stronger this time. "You heard what they said out there?" he said, not as a question but as a statement of fact. I froze in place, my hand still on the door handle. He looked at me with clear eyes, sharper and more focused than people ever expect from residents in nursing homes, eyes that saw through the polite pretenses we all maintain. "They think you don't matter," he continued slowly, measuring his words. "They think this work you do is beneath them. Beneath notice, beneath respect. But they're wrong. Profoundly and completely wrong." I turned back toward him, genuinely surprised by his awareness and his words. "I've been watching you for months," he said with conviction. "You're here every single day without fail. You remember all our names, and our preferences and our stories. You listen with real attention when we talk, even when we repeat ourselves. You treat us like we're still people who matter instead of problems to be managed or burdens to be endured." My throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "You know," he added, his voice taking on a reflective quality, "I used to run a successful company with hundreds of employees working under my direction. I made decisions that affected people's livelihoods and careers. People respected me because of my title and my position and the power I held in the business world." He smiled faintly, a sad smile that acknowledged how much had changed. "And now most days you're the only one who treats me like I still have value as a human being," he said quietly. "You're the only one who makes me feel like I'm still here, still present, still worthy of dignity and care and attention." The room felt very quiet, except for the soft hum of the heating system. He reached out with a slightly trembling hand and took mine firmly. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small for doing this work," he said with intensity. "Don't let their ignorance and their prejudice diminish what you accomplish here every day, because you give dignity to people who are slowly losing everything else they once had: their independence, their health, their memories, their sense of self." I couldn't speak through the lump in my throat, couldn't find words adequate to respond to his unexpected gift of recognition and validation. I squeezed his hand gently, holding it for a moment longer than professionally necessary, and finished checking his room before stepping back into the hallway, my eyes damp with tears I hadn't expected to shed. The visitors were gone now, their voices no longer echoing through the corridors, back to their lives and their vacations and their judgments. The lights were dimmed for the evening, creating the peaceful atmosphere that helps residents settle down for the night. And suddenly, the words they had said earlier didn't matter anymore, didn't carry the weight they had when first spoken, didn't define my worth or the meaning of my work. I finished my shift that night the same way I always do, the same routine I followed for 7 years. Still tired from hours of constant movement and attention. Still emotionally drained from the accumulated weight of caring deeply about people who were suffering and fading. But standing a little taller than I had at the beginning of the shift, walking with more confidence, carrying Mr. Harris's words like armor against future judgments. I'm still a nursing home worker today, and I will be tomorrow and the day after that. But I know now with absolute certainty that what I do matters deeply, perhaps more deeply than work that society celebrates and rewards with higher salaries and greater prestige. If you've ever been judged unfairly for caring for others, especially when no one is watching or acknowledging your efforts, especially when the work is hard and thankless and emotionally exhausting, remember this story and hold it close. The work that feels invisible to those who pass through quickly is often the work that matters most in ways that can't be measured or quantified. Work that preserves human dignity in moments when everything else is being stripped away. Work that says to vulnerable people that they still matter, that they're still seen, that they're still worthy of love and attention and respect. And if you've ever looked down on someone for the work they do, especially work that involves caring for society's most vulnerable members, Remember that your judgment reveals everything about your character and nothing about theirs. Remember that the people you dismiss so casually are often doing the hardest and most important work in our communities. Because at the end of every life, what matters isn't the titles we held or the money we made or the prestige we accumulated, but whether we treated people with dignity, whether we showed up when it mattered, whether we cared enough to see the humanity in everyone we encountered, regardless of their condition or their circumstances.